Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome back to yet another episode on your favorite Little Law YouTube channel. So today in this video, we are going to see about what is a Azure Service Endpoint, and in fact, we are discussing about a lot of Azure DevOps or DevOps related or Azure platform related topics in our videos in recent times. So if you have interest to move to Azure DevOps or to DevOps from your current skill set, you can watch all these videos and subscribe to our channel, and even you can ping me, you can WhatsApp me in my WhatsApp channel to learn and to understand how to do the migration to improve your skills as well. And yes, so with no further delay, let's go and understand what is a Azure Service Endpoint. So firstly, let me give you a simple example so that you can understand how what does this service endpoint and how does it work in a real world, but in a virtual example, right? So first I'll explain you that, and then I will take you through a valid, through what exactly is Azure DevOps, and then I will give you a real-time practical example. So firstly, just imagine Azure is like a big playground with a lots of different play areas like a sandbox, a swing, a slide, and these play areas are called services in Azure. So all these play areas, so we are identifying each and every single play area as the single services. So different play areas are different services in Azure. So each services will help you to do different things just like the different play areas in the playground. Like you can play swings, you can do the sliding in the slide, and you can use sand in the sandbox. So all these are different services, so you do different things in each of these services, right? So now to make sure you can get to each play area safely and easily, there are special gates or paths called endpoints, right? So since we are dealing with service endpoints, so now the path, the way you want to move to your service is called endpoints, and the service endpoint is like a special gate that lets you connect directly to a specific play area, which is in Azure, it's a service in the playground in the Azure. So a service endpoint is like a special gate that lets you connect directly to the specific service in Azure or a specific play area in the playground, right? So you're not going to access any other play area. If you want to access to slide, this gate will take you directly to the gate to the slide. If you want to go to swings, this gate will directly give you access to the swing. So same way, if you want to access one particular service, the service endpoint will connect you directly to that specific uh, a service in the Azure. So when you want to use a service in Azure, you go through the service endpoint, just like you go through the gate to get to the swing or the slide in the playground. And this helps you find and use the service quickly and securely, just like how the gates help you find the different play areas in the playground. So now I'll explain you in a better way so that you can understand in terms of the Azure platform. So now I will tell you what is a Azure Service Endpoint and how does it work. So in Azure, a service endpoint is a network configuration feature that allows you to extend your virtual network to securely connect to Azure services over a direct or optimized route. So what we are doing is, basically the service endpoint is a network configuration. So it's not any other feature. It's a network configuration feature, which is basically deals with the network, and that network configuration feature will allow you to extend your virtual network to securely connect to Azure services, right? So you can connect to Azure services over a direct or optimized route. So when you when you enable a service endpoint for a specific Azure service, it can be our Azure storage or it can be Azure SQL database on a subnet within your VNet. The traffic to the service remains within the Azure backbone network, providing improved security and performance. Right? So you understood, I believe. So let me reiterate it. So a service endpoint is a network configuration feature that allows you to extend your virtual network to securely connect to Azure services over a direct or optimized route. So when you enable a service endpoint for a specific service on a subnet which is inside your VNet. So just imagine. So you when you enable a service endpoint for a specific Azure services on a subnet, the traffic to the service remains within the Azure backbone network, providing improved security and performance. So that is the reason we are using a service endpoint. So let me take you through the point where how it works. So the first point is routing. So by enabling a service endpoint, the traffic from the VNet to the specific Azure service is routed through the Azure backbone network. It will not go outside the Azure network. It will stay only inside the Azure backbone network and bypassing the public network. And this reduces exposure to potential threats and enhances data protection. And then when it comes to security, the service endpoints allows you to control access to Azure services at the VNet level, right? So by the in the VNet level itself, you can have control, or you can control the access to the Azure services. So you can use network security groups, which we call as NSGs, to restrict the access to only the subnets that have the endpoint enabled, and this will ensure that only authorized traffic reaches the service. And then when it comes to the simplicity, you don't need to configure public IP addresses or set up complex firewalls. So these service endpoints simplify the network configuration by providing a direct and secure route to Azure services. And then finally, the performance. So by keeping the traffic within the Azure network, the service endpoints reduce the latency and provide more reliable connectivity compared to routing traffic over the internet. So overall, to enable a service endpoint, you have to configure it on a subnet inside your VNet, right? So it stays in your subnet and which is inside your VNet. So by specifying the service you want to connect to, and once configured, the endpoint routes the traffic destined for the Azure services directly through the Azure backbone network, ensuring a secure and optimized connectivity. And now I will take you through the real world example of how and where can we use the service endpoint step by step. So previously, we saw an example, a real world example where we are going to a playground and where we have different games like slides, like swing, and to go to them, like to the specific play area, we have to go to a separate gate and we'll get separate access to it. So, like that, then I have explained you a real world example. So, now I will tell you how to create, or I will take you through an example where we can set up a service endpoint for an Azure storage account. So, this will help ensure that the traffic between the virtual network and the Azure storage account stays within the Azure backbone network, improving the security and performance. So the scenario is we have to create a virtual network in Azure and we want to connect it securely to an Azure storage account using a service endpoint. So the connection is going to be between the Azure storage account and which is inside the virtual network. So first step is we have to create a virtual network and we have to ensure that we have a virtual network. And if we don't have a virtual network, we have to create one. We can use it, we can create it through the portal or Azure CLI or partial or even your Terraform code. The second step is you have to create a storage account. So here you have to ensure that you have a storage account. So if you don't have, create one. And then you have to enable the service endpoint for the subnet. So now you have to enable a service endpoint within your VNet to connect to the Azure storage service. So that's the third step. And the fourth step is after enabling the service endpoint on the subnet, you have to configure the storage account to allow access from this virtual network. That's the fourth step. So let me just quickly recap. So the first step is you have to create a VNet, and the second step is you have to create a storage account. The third step is you have to enable the service endpoint for the subnet to connect to the Azure storage service. And then the fourth step is after enabling the service endpoint on the subnet, you have to configure the storage account to allow access from this virtual network so that anybody who wants to access the storage account will come via the service endpoint and they can directly access the storage account. So let me give you a quick explanation of it. So the VNet, which we call as virtual network, is a logically isolated network in Azure where we can deploy the VMs or any other resources. And a subnet is a subdivision of the VNet where we can segment our network for organizational or security purposes. The third one, that main topic, which is a service endpoint. So by enabling a service endpoint for the Microsoft dot storage, we can ensure that the traffic between the VNet's subnet and the Azure storage account stays within the Azure backbone network. And when it comes to the network role, we can configure the storage account to allow access from the VNet and ensures that only the resources within the specified subnet can access the storage account, and that enhances the security. So with that, I come to an end, and I believe this video will be very useful to you. So until I meet you in another interesting video, it's bye bye from Vasan Shanmugam and your favorite Little Sla YouTube channel. Bye bye.